Why are we so scared of death? Have you ever stopped to think how this fear became a constant shadow in our lives, present even when we try to ignore it? Death, this inevitable moment that awaits everyone, is treated almost like a silent enemy, a forbidden word we're so scared of that we prefer to pretend it doesn't exist. But what if I told you that this fear is more of a prison than protection? That death isn't an abyss we should run from, but rather a natural crossing, a passage? Imagine for a moment that the end of this journey isn't a gloomy period, but the opening to a new chapter of consciousness, free from the body's weight, from pain, and from physical limitations. Have you ever thought of death not as an end, but as a path? Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. Maybe you're here today because the idea of the end hurts, or because you know someone facing this moment, a loved one, perhaps your parents, grandparents, or even yourself, preparing for this inevitability. The truth is, death is a topic that touches all of us, directly or indirectly, and that's why it's so important to bring this conversation into the light with respect, courage, and serenity. But before we go on, I want to invite you to do something that can help totally transform your relationship with this topic. Like this video if you've ever felt any fear or doubt about death. Comment below a word that defines what you feel when you think about the end of life. And, of course, subscribe to the channel so we can walk together in this search for understanding, acceptance, and inner peace. You're not alone on this journey. Now stay with me, because at the end of this video I'm going to share a surprising insight about death that might bring you a relief you can't even imagine right now. To talk about death with such serenity, we need to know someone who dedicated their life to transforming fear into love, anguish into understanding. Louise Hay was a woman who not only conceived this vision, she lived and tested her ideas, going through her own losses and pains, and transforming suffering into powerful teachings about life and about its end. Louise Hay was born into a difficult background, faced abuse, illness, and losses that could have destroyed her hope. Instead, she became one of those few souls who light the way for others, showing that healing is, first and foremost, within us. Her influence spread globally, especially with the book You Can Heal Your Life, where she connects mind, body, and emotions in the search for balance and self-love. But what brings her so close to the question of death is how she treated this final moment as part of the natural cycle, a process that, instead of being feared, can be embraced. Louise Hay accompanied people in their transition from life to death, mothers, elderly, sick people, and heard from them and herself what it truly means to leave the physical body. For her, consciousness doesn't extinguish. It merely frees itself from the body's ties and the pains of material existence. Her personal accounts, combined with her vast experience working with thousands of people, give her the authority of someone who speaks not just with theories, but with the essence of life lived and felt. That's why her words are so important. They don't offer ready-made recipes, but a new lens to understand what happens when it's time to depart. An invitation for you, watching this video, to look at this feared topic with new eyes, eyes that can see beyond fear, towards peace and love. And here's a moment to reflect. What would change in your life if you understood that the fear of death is just an emotional filter and not the ultimate reality of what happens? Think about that as we move to the next part. There's something so profoundly human in our resistance to death that it even seems natural, denying the end because the unknown is scary. But what if death isn't this brutal end we imagine? What if, in fact, it's a transition, a liberation? That's exactly the vision Louise Hay proposes, with a simple and powerful beauty. She tells us that the body is just the vehicle for consciousness, that flame that keeps us alive, that feels, that thinks, that loves. When the body reaches the end of its function, this flame that is the essence of our existence doesn't disappear. Instead, it dissociates from physical pain, emotional suffering, material limitation. It's not an abandonment, but an expansion of what we are, beyond the senses we know. Imagine taking off a heavy, tight coat. The weight goes away, the body becomes light, you breathe more easily. This, according to Louise, is what happens with consciousness at the moment of death. Freed from the body's weight, it enters a state of peace and freedom. It's not about blind belief or an empty promise, but an expansion of consciousness based on real observations, accounts of near-death experiences, and universal inner wisdom that crosses cultures and spiritual traditions. This perspective transforms what seemed like a sentence of fear into a natural, even beautiful, process. Death is not the end of existence, but rather the passage to another state of being, a change of frequency that reconnects us with what is greater than the body, than pain, than the limitations of time. Here I ask you, what would your life be like if you could perceive death as a great transition? How would that change the way you live today? For many people, especially the elderly, the fear of death comes with a series of very human anxieties: fear of pain and physical suffering, fear of loneliness, fear of not leaving a legacy, or even of being forgotten. These fears are not superficial. They represent deep insecurities, the natural desire to find meaning and love in the final passage. Louise Hay understands these fears and offers a comforting perspective. She reminds us that we don't need to face this moment alone, nor go through the anguish of the end of life with only fear. One of the greatest reliefs she proposes is emotional preparation for death, which begins long before the last breath. By preparing the heart, by forgiving, by expressing gratitude and love, we become more whole in this transition. And this preparation has a huge effect on the quality of life's end. Less emotional suffering, more peace, less feeling of abandonment. She cites real examples, people who were able to face death as a serene passage, precisely because they resolved emotional loose ends. They confessed what needed to be said, made peace with loved ones, allowed themselves to feel forgiveness and gratitude. For these people, death ceased to be a terrifying ghost, becoming an experience illuminated by acceptance. Furthermore, Louise emphasizes the importance of a support network, family, friends, and caregivers who accompany these people with presence, love, and respect. Feeling supported reduces the fear of loneliness and creates an atmosphere where the transition can happen with more lightness and dignity. Have you reflected on your greatest fears regarding the end of life? What would bring you peace? Thinking about these questions can be the first step towards, one day, being able to look at the end of life with more serenity. Many people believe that the greatest suffering at the end of life comes from physical pain. But what if I told you that, in most cases, the greatest suffering comes from something much more intimate, invisible, and silent? Unresolved regrets, unhealed relationships, words stuck in the throat, unspoken loves, time that won't come back. One of Louise Hay's deepest lessons is both simple and profound. The greatest gift we can give ourselves before we leave is emotional liberation. And this liberation happens when we choose to live. Yes, right here, still conscious, with more lightness, more forgiveness, more presence. She proposes that while we still have time, we should look inward, not with judgment, but with compassion. Identify the ties we still carry with pain. See hurts as scars we can heal. It's a journey of self-love, which begins with 3 attitudes: forgive, be grateful, and love. Forgive. It doesn't mean forgetting, nor accepting what hurt us. It means letting go of the burden, freeing yourself from the role of emotional prisoner. Louise taught that holding grudges was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. And she said, forgiveness is for you, not for the other person. When we forgive, we take off that bitter coat that weighs on our soul. Gratitude. We often forget to be thankful for simple things. A sunset seen from the balcony, a received hug, a song that touched us deeply, until we realize that time is getting shorter. Hay invites us to reclaim this power of gratitude as a daily practice. When we look back with gratitude instead of sadness, we completely change our relationship with the past. And love. Express love before it's too late, before the definitive silence. How many people leave without knowing how important they were to someone? How many times do we fail to say, I love you, you were essential to me, I'm sorry, and I'm grateful? Louise suggested simple yet transformative actions that bring healing where there seemed to be only pain. Write a letter to someone you never said a heartfelt goodbye to. Record a message telling someone the things you never had the courage to say while they were alive. Hold a small, intimate ceremony, alone or with someone you love, to say what needs to be heard, even if the other person is no longer on this plane. She knew that the soul feels even in silence, that words vibrate, even if not spoken aloud. That love, when finally expressed, has the power to reconcile an entire existence. Think now, is there someone you haven't forgiven yet, or who deserves to hear words that have been kept hidden? You still have time. Louise always said, the time to live in peace is now. And living in peace often is resolving those pending issues that would prevent us from dying peacefully. What makes the end of a life more serene? Have you ever asked yourself that question? The answer might be much simpler than we imagine. Louise Hay talked about this with great tenderness. The atmosphere we surround someone with in the final stage of life can be as important as medical care. A sensitive, loving, truly present environment completely transforms the experience of passing on. Think for a moment, what's more comforting in a moment of pain? A clinical, impersonal room with noises and haste, or a space filled with human warmth where soft music and gentle words are heard? She believed that an affectionate environment can help dissolve fear. Active listening, respectful touch, a gaze that doesn't shy away. These are small gestures, but they say a lot. I'm here. I see you. You're important until the very last moment. For family and caregivers, Hay left practical, yet extremely profound guidance. Sometimes a simple hand touch conveys more comfort than any speech. Instead of trying to cheer them up, listen without interrupting. Give the person space to speak. Bring pleasant memories, meaningful photos, music from the past, scents that evoke emotions. All of this reactivates memories and can bring moments of joy until the end. She said, when we offer presents to another, we offer dignity, and no one should leave without feeling worthy. This changes everything. The experience of death transforms not into an end, but into a farewell with honor. By the way, it's worth emphasizing, we're not just talking about those who are dying here, we're also talking about us who stay behind. Because when we truly welcome, we give peace to the other and to ourselves. There's a simple story Louise used to mention in her lectures. An elderly woman caring for her terminally ill husband decided to create a ritual. Every day, at the same time, she would hold his hand, look into his eyes, and say, "Even when you're gone, I'll love you with the same strength." He died a few days later, smiling. Louise said that smile was the purest expression of someone who felt deeply loved in their last hour. And that's what everyone deserves. Have you ever thought about transforming the environments in your home, or the home of someone who is passing, into sanctuaries of love and presence? It's not too late to start. Even unspoken words, uncomfortable silences, and emotional hesitations can change in an instant when someone feels they're not alone. What happens after death? None of us can answer with certainty, but Louise Hay offers us a powerful key. What if what continues beyond is precisely what we feel, remember, and love? For her, consciousness not only continues, it subtly interacts with those who remained, and often it manifests through signs, inexplicable sensations, vivid memories that resurface, coincidences that seem impossible. Not as ghosts or hauntings, but as tender touches, echoes of connection. Anyone who has lost someone knows. There are moments when certain songs play at the exact right time, perfumes appear in the air without explanation, dreams seem more real than waking life. Are they just constructions of the mind, or perhaps not? Louise said, the soul knows how to find those it loved. And it does so with respect, never to scare us, but to remind us of love. She believed that signs are not hauntings, they are invitations to acceptance. Memories, in turn, are pillars in the process of emotional integration. When we remember those who left with affection, laughter, even sweet tears, we are, according to Hay, helping the natural flow of grief and transforming pain into beauty. Moreover, she reinforces, well-lived grief is one that is not denied but respected. It's one that has space for longing, without rushing to overcome it. It's when we create ways to bring the past into the present, without it destroying us. Set up an altar with objects of the person who passed away. Light a candle at a symbolic moment of the day. Write letters to tell how you are experiencing each stage of longing. Louise called this active memory, when we transform memories into gestures of continuous love. Perhaps you've already felt one of these signs. Perhaps you've wondered if it was real. And I ask you back, what if it is? What if that instant is the simplest way to say, I'm here, everything is fine? Reinterpreting the signs is accepting that death does not break bonds, it transforms them. If you've made it this far and something inside you is quieted, even just a little, know that was Louise's intention, not to bring absolute certainties, but to whisper in your ear that maybe death isn't the end. Maybe it's the silent mirror of the love we built in this life. And now, I want to invite you to do something important. If this message touched your heart, even lightly, click like. Comment below what moved you most in this video, or share a memory of someone who passed and left love as an inheritance. And subscribe to the channel, because this journey of self-knowledge, inner peace, and loving consciousness doesn't end here. This is just the beginning of many conversations that need to happen. You don't have to face this journey alone. Here together, we will continue exchanging, learning, remembering. Because talking about death is above all honoring life. Have you ever noticed how we avoid talking about death? We change the subject, we laugh awkwardly, we pretend it only happens to others. We create this cold silence around something so inevitable, and that silence often hurts more than the loss itself. But Louise Hay did the exact opposite. She opened space for dialogue, without rush, without pressure, with delicacy and truth. The question she helps us ask is, why is talking about death still such a strong taboo? A good part of this resistance comes from fear, not only of dying, but of acknowledging that time is finite. Talking about the end of life is often confronting everything we put off, unspoken words, postponed desires, blocked affections. Death is like a mirror where we see clearly what we avoid in life. Louise invites us to do the exact opposite. Start talking before it's too late. She understood that silence weighs more than any farewell, because silence doesn't allow for preparation. It doesn't allow for healing. It doesn't allow for acceptance. How many families avoid talking about the end with their parents, grandparents, sick friends, purely for fear of seeming insensitive? And ironically, this silence can intensify the suffering of those who are leaving. Because when we don't talk, emotional loneliness is created. Death can be lonely, but it doesn't have to be. Conversation doesn't mean talking about death in a morbid or desperate way. Not at all. Talking can be a gesture of intimacy, of love, of reconnection. It can be an opportunity to look into someone's eyes and ask, is there anything you'd like me to know? Is there a story you'd like to tell me? Is there anything you'd like to resolve now with me? These simple questions open doors that might never have been opened otherwise. They build bridges, even in the face of the abyss. Louise recounted that at various times, when proposing such conversations with people in terminal stages, she witnessed profound emotional transformations. People who, on their deathbed, found space to ask for forgiveness, to declare love, to laugh at their own fear. All of this only happened because there was someone willing to listen without judgment. And believe me, the simple act of being present in a conversation about the end can be an eternal gift for those who leave and for those who remain. Talking about the end of life also prepares those who stay. Louise insisted, when we prepare emotionally, we carry less guilt, less pain, less regret. And that makes sense, because when a death happens unexpectedly, silently, full of unresolved issues, grief becomes drawn out, heavy, dark. But when there is lucidity, space, sharing, there can even be a light farewell. There can be peace. So think, what have you been avoiding saying? Who do you need to get closer to? What conversation needs to happen before time closes that possibility? Today might be the best day to start it. What does it mean to have dignity at the end of life? Many think dignity is about maintaining autonomy, being productive until the last breath, not becoming a burden on others. But Louise Hay completely deconstructs this idea. For her, the value of life isn't about being useful, but about being whole, present, human. She said with tenderness, even when the body fails, love remains whole. The heart keeps teaching. Many elderly people carry the fear of being discarded, forgotten, because we live in a culture that overvalues youth, efficiency, a healthy body, and forgets the wisdom that comes with time, the depth that comes with wrinkles, the beauty that inhabits fragility. For Louise, the elderly person doesn't stop being essential just because they stopped working, walking, or remembering. On the contrary, they continue leaving a legacy until the last moment. And what is a legacy, after all? It's not just material wealth. A legacy is what has touched hearts, what has inspired, what has taught, what has left seeds. It could be a family recipe passed down to a grandchild, advice repeated for decades and held in the memory of those who heard it, a maternal gaze that taught to love even without words, a silent presence that gave strength just by existing. Louise reminded us of something powerful. A person's soul doesn't age, it matures. And this maturation is the true gift a human being can leave to the world. But to live and die with dignity, a supportive network is needed, a family or community that doesn't isolate, that doesn't silence the elderly, that asks, that listens, that pulls up a chair with patience, that doesn't take away the elderly person's ability to choose, to express their truth, even with limitations. Dignity also means allowing each person to live their time of leaving as consciously as possible, without rush, without unnecessary intervention, with space to choose what they want to eat, what they want to hear, what message they want to leave, as long as they can speak. For Louise, dying with dignity is knowing that you are still whole, even if sick. It's knowing that your life made sense, not because you were perfect, but because you loved, got hurt, fell, and started over. She said, "We are like trees, and our fall doesn't have to be violent. It can be like when a leaf detaches, at the right time, gently with beauty." Have you ever stopped to think about what your legacy will be, or what was the legacy of someone who has already passed? It's worth remembering. It doesn't have to be something grand. It just has to be something true. And even more, in life you still have time to keep that legacy alive, to live the way you'd like to be remembered. We've reached the end of this video, but perhaps, more than talking about the end, what we've done so far is give a new beginning to how you see this inevitable stage of existence. The idea wasn't to resolve doubts, nor to give a manual on death, because, as Louise Hay taught us, no one has all the answers, and that's okay. The most important thing is to create space to ask, to feel, to allow yourself to live with more lightness, even in the face of finitude. The message that remains is simple, and perhaps you need to hear it again. Death doesn't have to be scary. It can be understood as a transition. A passage that doesn't nullify who we are, but reveals our deepest essence. Louise Hay taught us that love is the only thing that truly remains. It's love that heals. It's love that comforts. It's love that leaves marks that neither time nor death can erase. And now I want to invite you to do something important. If this message touched your heart even lightly, click like. Comment below what moved you most in this video, or share a memory of someone who passed and left love as an inheritance. And subscribe to the channel, because this journey of self-knowledge, inner peace, and loving consciousness doesn't end here. This is just the beginning of many conversations that need to happen. You don't have to face this journey alone. Here together, we will continue exchanging, learning, remembering, because talking about death is above all honoring life.